Right before your old self dies, something strange happens. The life you've known suddenly feels too small, too tight, almost suffocating. It's like wearing a skin that doesn't fit anymore. Most people mistake this moment for failure, but what they don't realize is that life is forcing them to outgrow the shell they've been clinging to. In a few minutes, you'll see why this discomfort isn't an ending. It's the hidden signal that transformation has already begun, and it means you're closer to your new self than ever before. Ever notice how your brain clings to routines, even the ones you no longer want? You'll tell yourself you're tired of thinking the same way, tired of repeating the same old cycles, and yet, without even meaning to, you fall right back into them. That's because your old self isn't just one habit you can switch off. It's a whole system, built like a web, each strand holding the other in place so it doesn't fall apart. Beliefs, expectations, doubts, reactions, they all feed each other, keeping the shape of who you've been, even when it no longer fits who you're trying to become. Think about it like the operating system on an old computer. The hardware might still function, but the software is outdated. It slows things down, crashes at the worst times, and resists any attempt to update itself. That's exactly how the old self behaves. It runs background programs made years ago, programs that once had a purpose, but are now blocking you from moving forward. And unlike files on a computer, you can't just hit delete. The system has to be recognized before it can be reprogrammed. Here's how it works in real time. One insecure thought pops up. Maybe it's something small like, I'll probably mess this up, and your body responds with that familiar anxious feeling. That physical tension makes you hesitate or avoid the moment altogether. The avoidance then confirms the thought that started everything. See, I really wasn't ready. That one loop becomes a cycle, running day after day, and because your brain values what's familiar, it allows that loop to solidify into default mode, even if it's painful. Psychologists often explain that the brain is wired to conserve energy by repeating patterns it already knows. Imagine walking the same path through the woods every day. The ground gets worn down, it's easier to walk, and so you keep taking it, simply because it requires less effort than creating a new path. Even if that trail leads you in circles, it feels safer than cutting through rough terrain to somewhere unknown. Your thoughts work the same way. The old self convinces you to stay on the same track, not because it's good for you, but because it spares your system the effort of building something different. The problem is, these familiar loops don't exist in isolation. That little voice of self-doubt isn't just self-doubt. It keeps alive a larger grid of fear. That fear bleeds into hesitation, which then reaches into your choices, which ripple into entire areas of your life. One shaky wire props up the whole circuit board of the old self. Take away doubt, and avoidance loses power. Take away avoidance, and fear starts to shrink. But as long as those connections remain intact, the web holds, and the outdated program keeps running. And here's where it gets interesting. When the system finally begins to crack, it doesn't feel smooth. It doesn't feel neat. Your mind senses disruption, and discomfort spikes. Old patterns will actually flare up more intensely, as if they're trying to defend their existence. You might notice that doubts feel louder, or fears seem stronger. That's not you sliding backwards. It's the sign you've reached the edge of your old design. Your system is resisting, because it knows it's on the verge of collapse. This is why clinging to old routines is not a sign of failure. It's evidence you've pressed against the boundary of what no longer fits. The very tension that feels unbearable is proof that cracks have started forming in the structure you've carried for so long. And that's the moment you gain power, not by pushing them away or pretending they're gone, but by finally seeing them for what they are. Systems you once needed, but no longer need now. The simple truth is that awareness is your first tool for rewiring. Naming the loop, spotting the outdated software, and understanding how one thought feeds another. This is the opening. Once you see the system, you're no longer stuck inside it. you can begin nudging it in a new direction. And when you change even the smallest loop, the others begin to lose their strength. So the question is not whether your old self will collapse, it's how you'll face the moment when it does. Because when the system truly begins to crumble, it feels nothing like order. It feels like chaos pressing at the edges of your mind. And that's exactly where we're going next. What does it feel like when a part of you starts breaking down? It's not calm or soothing. It doesn't come with gentle music or a clear roadmap. It usually feels raw and uncomfortable, like the air is getting thinner, and every breath requires more effort. You notice a pressure building, as if your own body and mind are suddenly too small for you to fit inside. It can feel like being trapped in a shell that no longer matches your size, pressing against you from every angle. Nothing sits the way it used to, and that tension only grows when you try to ignore it. That pressure is the signal that something underneath is reshaping, but at first, it rarely feels like progress. It often looks more like falling apart. A lot of people mistake this stage for hitting rock bottom. They assume it's depression, weakness, or proof that they've been going in the wrong direction. But what they're actually feeling is the collapse of a system that can no longer keep running the way it once did. It's like watching a bridge shake and crack under stress. The shaking feels terrifying, but it's a natural part of what happens before something new can be built. One of the clearest images of this process comes from the caterpillar inside its chrysalis. From the outside, you'd think it was peacefully resting, waiting to sprout wings. But inside, the caterpillar actually dissolves. It turns into a kind of living soup before reorganizing itself into a butterfly. That stage is messy, fragile, and unrecognizable from the creature it used to be. Nobody celebrates the liquid caterpillar stage because it doesn't look like growth, yet it's the exact process that makes growth possible. Something similar happens inside you when your old self starts to dissolve. Research on identity change shows that people going through major internal shifts often experience feelings of disorientation, even grief. You suddenly question things you never questioned before. Beliefs that once felt like solid ground reveal themselves to be sand. Habits you used to defend start to bother you so much that you can't even tolerate them. And as this unfolds, it feels like you've lost your footing, because part of you actually has. The part you held on to for so long, even if it didn't serve you anymore. Imagine someone who has always lived by the thought, "I'm not capable enough." They may have adjusted their whole life around it. They avoid risks. They settle for safe routines. They keep their feelings small so they won't be challenged. But the moment that belief cracks open, they feel lost for a while. What are they supposed to do without that old identity? Who are they if they stop rehearsing the same fearful script? That's the strange pressure that comes, where the old script is breaking apart, but the new one isn't yet written. This is called the dissolution stage. It's the moment where what you've known burns itself out. And if you've ever tried to let go of a habit or identity, you already know how loud the resistance can be. The doubts shout louder, the fears kick harder, not because you're failing, but because the system is gasping for survival. Just like fire rages brightest before it dies down, the old self often makes its biggest noise before it breaks. The hardest part about this stage is that it doesn't feel like a beginning. It feels like an ending, like you're losing too much at once. But in truth, the discomfort isn't the end. It's a threshold. Think about the deep ache in your body right before it heals stronger, or the ice that cracks before water can flow freely again. The same thing happens to your mind and identity. Structures must loosen, crumble, and release before space appears for anything else. Breakthrough always starts at the point of greatest tension, when the system can't hold together anymore, when the cracks are too wide, when you feel like the center cannot hold. That's when renewal presses through. That sense of falling apart is actually the exact signal that something new now has a chance to form. What comes next after the crumble isn't chaos or emptiness. It's the space where alignment begins to take shape. So what rises from the ashes when the old system burns away? At first, it doesn't look grand or powerful. Renewal comes quietly, almost hesitantly, like the first green shoots pushing up through frozen ground. It's delicate, uncertain, and so easy to overlook. But just because it feels fragile doesn't mean it isn't real. In fact, this early stage is when the foundation of your new self is forming, stronger and more adaptive than anything you've carried before. When your old patterns collapse, there's a sudden space where the default reactions used to live. And in that gap, the brain starts wiring together new connections. It doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't feel polished. You might notice yourself catching an old thought, pausing, and choosing differently. It's not a dramatic transformation. It's subtle, like noticing a room feels lighter after opening a window. The shift builds a little at a time, but each small choice stacks on top of the last until an entirely new system takes shape. The trouble is, this stage doesn't feel comfortable right away. Think of a snake after it sheds its skin. For a short time, it's exposed. The new surface underneath is raw and tender, not quite ready for the elements. That's what rebirth feels like inside of you. The security of the old beliefs is gone, but the protection of the new system isn't fully built yet. You're growing, but you also feel vulnerable. And this vulnerability tricks many people into thinking they've regressed. They expect renewal to feel strong immediately, but strength only comes after exposure, after you sit in that discomfort long enough for resilience to develop. Neuroscience helps explain why this stage feels so uneasy. When your brain starts forming new neural pathways, the old ones slowly weaken. Imagine a highway you've driven for years being closed down. You now have to navigate a new route, and at first it feels confusing and inefficient. You might second guess yourself, take wrong turns, or get frustrated. But with repetition, that new route becomes clear and familiar. Over time, it even becomes faster than the road you always used before. That's what's happening inside your mind. The old system of doubt, fear, or hesitation loses strength because you stop traveling it, and the new path of clarity and self-trust gains momentum because you keep choosing it. You can actually feel this happening when self-doubt begins to dissolve. There's a moment when the voice that always whispered, "You'll fail," starts to sound less convincing. Instead of tightening up in response, you start to consider, "Maybe I can handle this." That single shift is more than one new thought. It's the seed of an entirely different system, because when you trust yourself in one decision, that confidence leaks into other areas. You stand differently. You speak with a steadier rhythm. You take actions you used to avoid. Removing one flawed piece, like fear, causes the whole network to reorganize itself around strength, certainty, and peace. And this change cascades. When fear begins to thin out, it creates room for momentum. Without the heavy weight of hesitation, you move quicker. Without the fog of doubt, you think sharper. It's not just one small improvement. It's a chain reaction where new systems activate together, lifting you higher than you've ever stood before. What started as fragile sprouts breaking through the frost eventually become roots strong enough to hold up a new season of your life. That's why transformation goes far beyond survival. Survival only means holding on. Evolution means becoming something your old self never had the capacity to imagine. The caterpillar didn't survive by clinging harder to what it was. It evolved into something new entirely. The same is now happening within you. The dismantling of the old wasn't loss. It was clearing. It was carving out enough room so that something truer could breathe. The so-called death of the old self is nothing to grieve. It's the birth of a version of you that isn't split by fear or carried down by constant doubt. It's the rise of an integrated self that can finally fill the space that once felt so unbearably tight. This new system doesn't run on reflexive fear. It runs on alignment, trust, and forward movement. And if you're feeling that fragility in yourself right now, If the discomfort seems sharp and unfamiliar, remember, it isn't a setback. It's the signal that your rebirth is already underway. This is where urgency meets hope, because once you allow that new system to breathe, everything else begins to shift with it, and the only direction from here is forward. The old self isn't actually dying. It's clearing the ground, so something wiser, stronger, and truer can take its place. What feels like an ending is really just the opening scene of something new. Don't resist the tension you're feeling right now. That pressure is proof that your transformation has already started. It's not your downfall, it's your signal. If you know you're in that space, claim it out loud. Write the word reborn in the comments to mark this moment. You're not losing yourself. You're finally stepping into the version of you that was waiting all along.